This is Diane Mendez-Cantu, and I will be doing my presentation, my fairy tale presentation, using the elements forest, friendly, fairy, shoemaker, and delicious. The ending sentence I will use is, "Let's throw a feast to celebrate," they said, and what a feast it was. Once upon a time, long, long ago, in a land far away, there was a family who moved into the village. This family was a young man and a young woman, very beautiful. They were obviously very deeply in love. They were kind and friendly to everybody around them, although the villagers were still a little bit standoffish because somebody came into their village that they didn't know about. And it was obvious they were deeply in love. The young man was a hard worker. Early spring, a baby came. This baby was beautiful. This baby was sweet. This baby grew into a very kind, very gentle child. One day, while walking through the forest, this young family decided to take a little hike. They were walking, and before they knew it, they were surrounded by a pack of wildlings. Wildlings were wolves with a magical background. It was thought that these wolves, their bite would produce fever, hallucinations, and horrible, horrible sores that would eventually become septic, and they would just cause horrible infection, and the person would die within 24 hours. Well, the young man and the young woman, they were attacked by these wildlings. And while they're being attacked, a fairy came by. A fairy was there, swooped down, and dropped a cloak of a blanket over the baby. Now, this cloak was a magical cloak. The baby became invisible to these wildlings. These wildlings were attacking the parents. The parents were no longer able to fight back, but this baby was invisible to them. Well, the next morning, a woodcutter was walking through the forest and came upon a terrible sight. The sight of this couple who were no longer living. He heard a cry and he looked around and he saw a baby. He saw this baby laying down, just crying away, not a scratch on her. Well, he took this baby to the village, and a kind, grandmotherly woman in the village took her in. And the villagers believed that the parents had called her Ellen, so they went ahead and kept that name, and they called her Ellen. Ellen was a kind young maiden. She grew up into a beautiful young lady, and this grandmotherly villager who took her in, took her as her own, taught her important things: how to cook, how to clean, how to tend a garden, how to grow vegetables, how to grow herbs and tend to herbs. And the most important thing is that Ellen learned from this grandmother how to use these herbs and make them into potions and concoctions that would help to heal. Mothers loved to call Ellen because she would come and bring them a mixture of teas, a chamomile and a peppermint that would soothe their babies and let the babies sleep all night. If someone was injured, they would call Ellen to come and bring her herbs and her roots and her potions, and they would get healed very, very quickly. Well, one day, a shoemaker and his wife, they came to Ellen and they said, "We need help. Our son is sick and we don't know what to do. The village doctors have tried and he's getting sicker and sicker every day." So Ellen came and she saw this young man. She had never seen him before, but she saw this young man and her heart skipped a beat. He was a beautiful young man. He seemed so kind, so gentle. Just the look that he had about him was a kind, gentle young man. All of a sudden, she felt compassion for him. She cared for him, and she realized that she needed to do whatever she could to help him get better. Well, he became sicker and sicker. One day, he woke up, and he was all better. He looked up and he said, "Is that an angel?" She said, "No, my name is Ellen, and you were very sick, but you're better now." And he saw her, and he thought she was the most beautiful young maiden he had ever seen. He was so grateful to her. The shoemaker and his wife were very grateful to her. Peter became fast friends with Ellen. Ellen became fast friends with Peter. They began talking. they began bumping into each other in the village. They began making excuses to go see each other. She would stop by the shoemaker's shop. He would stop by her cottage at the edge of the forest where she lived with her grandmother. And they would talk. One day, the shoemaker and his wife realized what was going on here. Alan and Peter were falling in love. As kind as Alan was, the shoemaker and his wife, they weren't very happy. You see, the parents of Ellen had come into the village not long before her birth. Nobody knew who they were. They didn't know if they were from a rivaling clan, from a village that was not very kind with them. They didn't know her background. They didn't know her family. And they had known the blacksmith's family for generations. The blacksmith had a young daughter, the same age as Ellen, and they wanted the blacksmith's daughter to be Peter's bride. When Peter realized this, he said, "No, I love Ellen, and Ellen is going to be my bride. I want to have a family with her. I want to continue the shoemaker business with her as my bride." And the father said, "No, absolutely not. I refuse to allow you to see Ellen anymore. That's it. You can't see her anymore." Peter was devastated. He was so sad. He didn't know how to tell Ellen. He didn't know what to do. So that night, he decided to meet up with Ellen. He met up with her at the edge of the forest and said, "Ellen, let's go for a walk. We need to talk." They began talking, sharing their hopes, sharing their dreams. Peter didn't have the heart to tell her what his dad told him, but he knew he had to. He was about ready to tell her what Dad said, what the shoemaker and his mom said. But all of a sudden he stopped. He didn't hear any birds anymore. There were no birds chirping. There were no rabbits or small animals scampering through the forest. He heard nothing. All of a sudden, he stopped. He held Ellen's hand. He heard a low growl, and then a louder growl, and then he heard another growl with that one. All of a sudden, they were surrounded by a pack of wildlings. These wolf-like creatures who had vicious teeth that were dripping with poisonous saliva were there looking at them. All of a sudden, one jumped and attacked Peter. Ellen held on to Peter, and all of a sudden, that fairy that had swooped down and covered Ellen with a cloak many, many years ago came by. All of a sudden, the wildlings, they whimpered, they yelped, they turned around, and they scampered off very quickly. Ellen was so grateful. She was so happy, but she was so sad because she knew that the bite of a wildling was fatal. So she began crying, "Fairy, what am I to do?" The fairy circled around Peter, wrapped him in a bubble of light. All Ellen had to do was barely tap the bubble, and Peter would float and follow wherever she went. So she ran to the village with this bubble of Peter floating behind her. She ran to the shoemaker. The shoemaker saw his son and said, "What did you do? Ellen, get out of here. I never want to see you again." Ellen didn't know what to do, so she left. And the shoemaker and his wife, they put Peter in the bed. Peter was sick. He became feverish. He began to have open sores all over his body. Ellen ran to her cottage that she shared with grandmother, and she knew that there was a potion that she was able to use. She had heard about it, but it had never been used before. It was a dried flower that she had found that was said to have magical properties, and if used before sunrise, after a person was bitten by a wildling, that person would survive. So Ellen, she mixed the roots and the herbs and this flour, this dried flour. She mixed it, and she made it into a tea with her tears. And this tea she had in a bowl, and she ran back to the village, to the shoemaker's shop, and she said, "I have something that'll help Peter." And they said, "Leave, leave. We don't want to see you. You caused this injury. You're causing the death of our son. No one's ever gotten healed from a wildling's bite." And she tried to tell them, "This'll help, I promise it'll help, I know it'll help." But they said, "Leave," and they pushed her outside. She fell down against the wall, and she cried. She cried and she cried. All of a sudden, she saw this light around her, this light That was that fairy. The fairy said, Ellen, here's the cloak that I used on you twice already. Cover yourself with it. It'll last a short time. It'll allow you time to go inside and give Peter his tea that'll help heal him. So she put the cloak on, and she saw Peter's mother, the shoemaker's wife, open the back door, and she walked out. So Ellen slipped in unnoticed because nobody could see her. Well, she got up to Peter's bed, and she got the cup, the bowl that had the tea in it, and all of a sudden Peter jumped out, sitting up out of bed, and he was having hallucinations. He thought she was a wildling. He started attacking her. All of a sudden the bowl slipped out of her hand and fell into the dirt ground, and she said, Peter, it's me, it's me, it's me. He fainted. He let her go and fainted and fell back in bed. She looked down, and in the bowl there was just a drop of the tea left. And so she picked it up, and she opened his lips, and she dropped that one last drop of the liquid on his tongue, and she closed her eyes. All of a sudden Peter sat up. He said, Ellen, are we in heaven? Did we die? Did those wildlings kill us? And she said, no, my love, no. They attacked you, but you're healed now. You're better. Well, the shoemaker and his wife, they heard voices coming from Peter's room. They walked in, they looked around, and they saw Peter sitting up. They saw Ellen, because by now, Ellen's cloak that was invisible had faded away, and they could see her. They realized what happened. They were so grateful. The villagers heard about what happened. They came bringing delicious treats. And Peter's father, the shoemaker, he told his wife, I'm going to get the minister. We're going to allow them to marry. And he told everybody else, he told them, let's throw a feast to celebrate. They said, and what a feast it was.